Marco Rubio has made another excellent, direct, and impassioned speech, this time about left-wing extremism and violence. Hard to disagree with him, isn't it? Especially considering that today the FBI headquarters in New York got a little bit warmer, thanks to some hero pouring gasoline all over the entryway and nearly setting themselves ablaze, not to mention throwing fireworks into the fire and shooting people with an airsoft rifle. But what does left-wing violence actually mean? Like, this guy wasn't really trying to hurt people, obviously, but it's quite a bit more than a public nuisance, wouldn't you say? A bit more than peaceful protesting. And some people, well, they have it in their mind to do real harm. But why? I mean, they have no real leadership guiding them to violence, right? And to that end, what even is the left wing itself? I've expressed this thought plenty of times. Plenty of people have. Even politicians have. The whole country feels it. The left wing is headless. And I think it's been that way for many years now, but instead of succumbing to its wounds, it's thrashing around blindly and causing catastrophic damage.
This is a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by a hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. It is a revolt of the worst against the best, a revolt of the weak and the cowardly against the strong and the good. It is perpetrated by those who cannot build, who cannot create, who cannot achieve great things, and take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy by seeking to destroy those who can. This is what radical leftism is. It may wear various different slogans and ideologies across place and time. They can call themselves anti-capitalist, or anti-imperialist, or communist, or anarchist, or Marxist, but the fundamental character is always the same. It's always the same. It is a poisonous resentment, cloaked in the language of equality and justice and liberation, an overwhelming need to tear down what greater men have built, to wreck what is beautiful and what is right on behalf of people who are only filled with ugliness and have nothing else to offer the world. Through violence and through terror, they once again seek to impose their ugliness on all of us.
Rubio makes broad statements here. Much of it is less of an accusation towards the left and more of a rallying cry for the right. And while I don't agree with every aspect of his framing, I do agree with the purpose. But even with his explanation, what does it mean? What does left-wing extremism or left-wing violence even mean to something that has no head, no brain, no sense of self or identity, no core at which to strike? Well, the problem is exactly that. The left-wing politicians are not leaders. They are celebrities who gained power through votes farmed by bribing demographics, which isn't entirely uncommon in politics, granted, but it was done to an extreme degree in the past few decades by the left wing. I've mentioned this before, but women were bought. They were bought with abortions and an acceptance of nudity and misandry, which is a purely negative thing. Black people were bought. They were bought with a promise of power and the breaking of the bondage of white supremacy, which no longer even exists. Those diverting from any norm of gender were promised equality, which they already had, and immigrants were promised free, no questions asked citizenship, which it kind of seems like they already had that as well, since apparently all of them have been living in the country for decades without question. And now the left wing is very rapidly moving on to justifying the murder of rich people and the destruction of the dollar in their bid for communism, claiming that everyone will get everything they want for free and no one will have to work or worry ever again. These bribes led to the extremism and violence we see today, each instituted by someone who is terrified by the thought that America is changing into exactly what it was founded as, a white Christian patriarchy, when in reality it is only in the very recent past that America has changed, and that change has been at the hands of the Democrats and their insidious promises. But these are nothing but mad gambits for votes. They are not things that make the country better. They want to make individual lives better for the sake of votes, but they're not trying to make the country itself better. It's just damaging the country to make all of these empty promises. The Democrats, seeking power, they created adversities to their own country. They made adversaries out of their own countrymen by greasing the palms of anyone who could write their name. They created these mercenary bands, these wolf packs. They incentivized, galvanized, vindicated, and validated all of their insane and selfish beliefs, pouring fuel on the fire. Anti-male, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-capitalist, anti-hetero, anti-natalist, anti-American. I mean, what's left? They're anti-existence. The Democrats turned these people into raving lunatics, and if they have power, they'll surely doom us. So here's the uncomfortable question. If the Democrats are the villain, what's the solution? Turn America into a single-party state? And then what? Complete power corrupts completely, and it doesn't take long for that to happen. As much as I would love to have a government that I could implicitly trust, I can't trust a group simply because they aren't Democrats. But if Democrats are the sole reason we're in this state, and they double down with new nonsense every single day, then it's simply unquestionable as to what needs to be done. They cannot be allowed to continue as a party. They're trying to gain total dominance over the country, and they're destroying every aspect of it in the process, right? That's sort of the weirdest part. It almost sounds sinister to say that the party is no good, recognizing that such things actually can end. For even middle-aged people, it feels as though the Democrats and Republicans are some divine commandment upon the country that have always been and always will be. It must feel even odder for younger people. But of course, that's not true. And were the Democrats destroyed, well, there would surely be a replacement, right? But would they be replaced by some puppet party of the Republicans? Would the destitute people of the left grasp on to anything new out of desperation? Would they try to twist it into some neo-Democrat party with all the same problems of the current one? And Rubio's right. This cannot be tolerated. Democrats' ideology is destroying everything. Morality, happiness, birth rates, borders, equality, kindness, goodness, faith, solidarity. The very basics of reality, like what a woman is, are all subject to the Democrats' boot heel. But even though the Democrats are full of foreigners championing the end of America as we know it, who will sound the horn to demolish them? How does that even happen? I don't know the legal technicalities of that, but I fear that we will continue on, as always, a train stuck on its track. Democrats will do bad things in public, and they will be ignored by Republicans for fear of making a scene, of getting canceled. And we're already pretty far along in that process. Like the barely clothed women walking around in Disney World or any other public park. Like the teen takeovers raising shopping malls as if a locust in a field of wheat. Like the blue-haired with pronouns prowling throughout the female dormitories despite having a penis. The malcontents will be tolerated by people better than them, and they will continue to make things worse and worse until newer generations of Americans are so used to living in a zoo that they don't question it. Like I said, we're already pretty much there. Until new generations of government are so used to being the daycare of the country that they don't even categorize the Democrats as doing anything wrong. And like I said, we were pretty much there. As if Democrats are some divine commandment upon the country that has always been and will always be. But of course, that's not true.
We will hear this kind of organized violence and terror will be dismissed. It will be dismissed as a partisan fiction. A whole industry grew up in our countries around the study of extremism. We have think tanks and fellowships and journals and consultancies with the unspoken understanding among them that the only kind of political violence that was a true threat to our system, that only one kind of political violence was a true threat to the system. A bomb planted by a neo-Nazi group was a nefarious and murderous act of evil. It is. But a bomb planted by a Marxist revolutionary, well, that's just merely a tragic excess of idealism. Perhaps its means were misplaced or overzealous, but its ends were virtuous and just. That's the implication of how they treat it. For years, this extraordinary ideological prejudice was embedded in the way we talked about political violence and extremism. It was repeated again and again until it was accepted as the neutral and objective baseline, so entrenched in the mainstream conventional wisdom that it came to be regarded as an apolitical fact.
When I first started this channel nearly a year ago, I felt like the Democrats could come back if they had shed the insanity of their voter base. Now, not even a year later, and I realize just how weak the Democrat politicians are. They cannot cast off the deranged constituents. They know they can't, so they appease them. Instead, they try to institutionalize the country, the government, as these adult children's babysitters. They tell us to tolerate the unhinged walking the streets, free from their cages. Not even a year later, and I'm thinking the only solution to this problem is to obliterate the Democrat Party entirely. Not in some metaphorical way, but for it to be dissolved entirely.
So many people in positions of power have repeatedly dismissed acts of violence and even terrorism as legitimate forms of political expression, so long as they served a left-wing cause. It is why during those so-called George Floyd riots in the summer of 2020, as criminals and extremists burned and looted their way through America's great cities and nearly brought the country to its knees, city governments all across the country simply refused to prosecute the people conducting these acts of violence and terror. It is the reason for the now infamous image, maybe you all recall this, of a news anchor from a very prominent agency, a news anchor standing in a neighborhood consumed in flames. Meanwhile, the chyron on the bottom read that the protests were mostly peaceful. This was something worse than a double standard. Left-wing violence was not just excused, it was treated as sacrosanct, a protected class unto itself. That era has to end.
But that's not what Rubio is talking about here.
This is an international conference because we are facing a transnational threat. These are not distinct and isolated cells. They are interconnected networks. They do not recognize our borders. They do not believe, in fact, in the nation state itself. They coordinate, they communicate, they travel, they train, and they act together, sharing the same infrastructure, sharing the same enemies, sharing the same mission. Antifa militants and their comrades travel from across Europe and to the Americas to participate in each other's attacks.
No, it doesn't sound like he's talking about Reddit or Blue Sky, about the myriad Democrat politicians, many born in foreign countries. He's not talking about the threats made through social media. He's talking about terrorist cells. And this, unfortunately, feels like a scapegoat. Does removing a terrorist group prevent them from coming back when you've allowed Reddit to stay in place? When you've allowed the politicians undermining America to retain power? It's like painting your yard red and expecting it to stay red. Well, no, it's just going to keep growing. It's going to keep growing, and then it's going to turn green again. The extremist mentality will only be hardened by persecution, and the hyper-leftists will only be emboldened by the zealotry of their murderous Robin Hoods. And while likely ushered into being through foreign or even local psyops, the true problem isn't the mere existence of neo-identities, as that would be a short-lived fad. It's that these identity politics were fostered under the umbrella of the left until it became a mental STD, and through the internet it became a digital STD. Try as they might, and they certainly are, the internet cannot be completely controlled, so only the politicians encouraging this mindset can be squelched. The silence of the Democrats is then the only way to reclaim America. Again, it's not like I want to live in a single-party state, but I also don't want Dems to destroy the country entirely. And I'm sure the Republicans, just like the Democrats, want to use everything they can to gain power, but if we're picking favorites, it's not exactly a hard call. I just don't know what else can be done. Thankfully, such a burden does not rest upon my shoulders, and while I pity whoever has to take up that mantle, I'll herald them, all the same, as they deserve all the respect and assistance that we can offer. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please do the YouTube things.
You are here because this is real, and it is getting worse, and it can no longer be denied, and it can no longer be ignored, because it is time to crush this evil forever.